Remember to support us by subscribing and sharing, but also signing up at Cricket8.com, where live scorecards cover 8,000 matches a year with advanced visual details that tell you who is actually in front in the game.
So in case you haven't already done that, make sure you do sign up at Cricket8.com. Hello and welcome to Cricket8 Podcast. I'm Megha and joining me here today is Mash, and we are going to be talking about India's busy test season ahead. It's an interesting time for Indian cricket because it would have at its disposal best of its talents, both as far as the juniors are concerned, as far as seniors are concerned, and it's a very busy test calendar. It holds true for almost all the teams at the moment. They're playing a lot of test cricket. It's not something that we're used to seeing. But from India's point of view, how excited are you?
I mean,
Ash?
do you know what? Do you know what, Meha? What I'm intrigued to kind of understand from an Indian perspective with this kind of huge test season ahead is what, and this is the big question that I really want to get into is what equals success. I think so, and the reason why I say that is when you're a smaller test nation, in some senses, winning any match is a success in some senses, right? But when you're a bigger test cricketing nation like India, obviously Australia, etc., the metrics of success change, and it's not enough to I don't know, maybe win 2 test matches in a 5-match test series. Is it win or go home? So looking at the immediate kind of future for India, obviously they've got the home test series against Bangladesh, the home test series against New Zealand, and then what some people class as the big one of the two, or the first big one, the away test series in Australia. So the first question I kind of put to you, this before we even look at England, is what would you class as a successful season?
So, one metric there could potentially be making it to the WTC finals and lifting the trophy because 2 attempts in the past and that did not culminate in the trophy, which is slightly strange because no other team made it to both the finals. New Zealand won it in the first, wasn't anywhere near contention to make it to the top 2 in the second, and Australia, of course, winning it for the second time. So already India is perched at the top of the table, so 68.52 points, and highly likely to make it to the final. So probably that will not qualify as success. Now, I want to also refer to the England series that concluded in March. So after India lost the first test, or before the series began, the conversations were on the fact that it's been 12 years since India lost a series at home. Just the fact that they lost a test at home was huge. That Hyderabad test loss was huge setback because India are not expected to lose test matches at home, leave alone conceding series. So what is a disaster? That's probably what I'm addressing here. But Bangladesh, they fought hard against Pakistan and came back with 2 wins in 2 matches. New Zealand, we're not really sure if at the moment they are at the level that they were operating in around 2021. So we are expected to beat both the teams. And like England, we're aiming for a clean slate, also target for clean slate with due respect to the opponents. Then comes the Border Gavaskar Trophy. The expectations have changed. We're not back in
Mm.
2003 when just the fact that India fought back so hard, just the fact that India won test there was significant enough. India has back to back won Border Gavaskar trophies in Australia, so the expectations are at all time high. India has to replicate that performance for it to be termed as a success. And also considering how with depleted resources last time around India managed to win 2021 season, now the expectations become even higher. Then obviously that England series, you're expected to win that as well. So you have to win all of those, clean slate at home, and away toss, win, come back having won the series, and then also live the World Test Championship. So I think all of that combined would qualify as success. Anything less than that would be an issue. Before we talk about how uh, before we kind of narrow it down to individual players and if India would have groomed
Mm.
enough players, whether that is success or not. But what do you think, from your point of view, from somebody who follows Indian cricket but not as he has other loyalties, let's put it like that? What, according to you, would be fine enough for India?
Listen, listening to you just describe that, the bar is high. Obviously, as a West Indian fan and supporter, I can I can only dream of some of the things that you just said. But the bar you just described is exceptionally high. And as you were saying that, what was going through my head was how many games are India allowed to lose? So forget series. I'm not even going to go to
Hmm.
series. How many games are they allowed to lose? So, like you, I would expect, irrespective of what Bangladesh did to Pakistan, you have to
Yeah.
assume that India beat Bangladesh 2-0. You have to assume, because New Zealand seemed to be in some kind of transition,
Hmm.
that India beat New Zealand 3-0, or that should be the expectation. Now, Australia's an interesting one because, and I get that the metrics for Indian fans is different. Yes, India have won the last two in Australia, but it's still Australia. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I, I, I worry that it's hard to explain this. I worry that India go into that series with an expectation that they should win, as if Australia aren't good, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. Whilst I get it that there should be an expectation in India that they can now go to Australia with absolutely no fear and expect they can and expect that they can come away with a victory. If Australia play to their absolute maximum, there can be no guarantee that India come away with a victory, because I mean obviously it's a different format of cricket, but if we go back to the ODI World Cup, India
Yeah.
obviously were flawless through that whole World Cup, and then Australia happened to turn up for that final. And with respect to England,
Thanks
Australia are
for
probably the
reminding.
only with with respect to England, Australia are probably the only team in world cricket who, if they turn up, pretty much can
Yeah.
defy anything in any circumstances. So for me, I think there has to be a caveat on that Australia series, in
Hmm.
so much as if India were to lose it, for example, 3-2, or 2-1 or whatever, it shouldn't be seen as a disaster. Now, what I put back to you is this. I think the England series is bigger than the Australia series because India don't
Hmm.
win as regularly anymore. I'd say anymore. India don't win regularly in
Yeah, as much
England
in.
in terms of series. So I actually think um, if you had to, obviously Indian fans will want both, but if you had to take one over the other, I actually think the England series might be the bigger one, just because of the
Hmm.
historical weight of trying to win there.
Hmm. And probably that expectation has changed because of what has happened in the recent past with regards to the Border Gavaskar Trophy. The comparisons have now begun looking different. For example, now in England, 2007 we won it, and then recently in fact we struggled in between, and the 4-0 drubbing both for India in England and Australia then happened. So that obviously is a disaster, no matter how we try and describe it, team in transition or whatever. And then now coming to more recent past, so 2021, India got that lead. Then there was this one game because of COVID cases, it was postponed to 2022. India went on to lose that game and pretty comprehensively, courtesy that knock by Johnny Bairstow, twin hundreds. And that because India lost that test, India couldn't win the series, and there
Mm,
was a lot of hue and cry over it. So the expectations are at an all-time high. India is expected to win both the series. That's what we're talking, addressing it from expectations point of view. Now, also looking at the opponent, baseball at home. There
mm,
was this concern around baseball as well, if things are going fine enough. Considering again that loss to India 4-1, but those were very different conditions. Now here, they've defeated two opponents, Sri Lanka, series wins for them, Sri Lanka and West Indies. But with due respect to both the teams, not as strong opponents, or in terms of personnel, do not have the resources that India would have. So
mm,
just looking at India's opponents at conditions very familiar to them and how they are going to stack up. Uh, Border Gavaskar Trophy, I'd get back to that. Now, maybe the first time when India won it in 18, there were two stalwarts that were not present in the Australian side. Both Steve Smith and David Warner, they were not present. And then subsequently, it was the Indian side that was low on resources, and it was almost like it was a fight to get an 11 on the field. Yet India won. So I think that's the point, that India won despite being all out at Adelaide and losing comprehensively. So that fight back, the fact that India did not have enough resources as it's at its disposal. So all of those comparisons make it difficult for India now. That if they do not live up to it, it's going to be trouble.
Do you think, Megha, that there is a need, and I link this to India winning the T20 World Cup this year, right? When India won that World Cup in the Caribbean this year, it felt like, for players like Rohit and Virat, etc., it felt like they had confirmed, not that they needed to, but they had almost like confirmed their legacy. We've won a World Cup for India.
Yeah.
Do you think for someone like a Virat, for example, that he needs, obviously he doesn't need it, but do you think for some of these players, for their legacy, that they need a test series? Because you just described players who went to Australia and won with that Indian B team that won the series in during the pandemic. Do you think some players need a legacy win in Australia or need a legacy win in England to almost say, and I did that as well? Or do you think it doesn't really boil down like that for some of the players?
I think it's more around the World Test Championship. They need that title. For example, in the case of T20 World Cup or previous, the last year's 50 overs World Cup. So when you mention that, it kind of, any Indian cricket fan, the mention of 19 November, it is bound to evoke memories and very sad memories. So you could see how upset, how dejected the players were and what it meant for them. It's not like Rohit Sharma has not been a part of World Cup winning team. He was with an Indian team during the 2007 T20 World Cup win. Virat Kohli lifted the 2011 World Cup, was part of the winning team. Rohit Sharma was not the part of that team for sure. But yeah, so but this gap in between, this huge gap in between, and then in 2013 they were both part of the Champions Trophy winning team. But then this huge gap in between, this wait of 10 years, and it just kept piling on. The pressure kept piling on. And we could see how important it was for players in their reactions after the World Cup win. You could see them emotional. You could see them hugging each other. And that feeling of having finally done it, finally lifted the trophy. Because in between, it had turned to, at least in the fans' perception, it had turned to whether India's winning World Cups or not. The bilateral series ceased to matter. Of course, something like Border Gavaskar Trophy would still matter. Test series win in England would still matter. But otherwise, bilaterals cease to matter. So I think it all boils down to winning the World Test Championship. And then whatever happens in the Border Gavaskar Trophy and the England series can then take the back seat. But looking at it from outside, and also from the point of view of England and Australia, do you think they would accord it as much importance as they do to, say, Ashes? Of course, it would not be the same, but you know the level of competition that is going to be in front of them. So how would they view it?
That's interesting. That's interesting, and ultimately, I think both of us would need to have like a kind of big talking head from England or Australia to give us their view. But I can only speak as a neutral, right? And as a neutral, this speaks to how well regarded the Indian Test cricket side is, and it also speaks to where the kind of level of competition has gone between the big three in cricket, in that I look at India going to Australia for five test matches and India going to England for 5 test matches as big events. Obviously, they don't have the name, the Ashes. The Ashes will always be the Ashes because of its historical legacy.
Exactly.
But nobody can deny that a 5-match test series between India and Australia and India versus England is box office. It's box office cricket. And I think there is an acknowledgement in world cricket that will be the best versus the best. Whether England truly deserve to be in that conversation or not is another question altogether. But everyone will acknowledge that it's some kind of level of the best versus the best, and this is the pinnacle of modern day Test cricket. And although bilateral series are increasingly on the wane or decline in terms of how world cricket views them, I think fans accept that the ones between the big three, it's bigger than a bilateral series. If you, the mere fact it's five tests tells everybody that in and of itself. But something that you said about the World Test Championship is quite interesting to me, because it's essentially what? So we've got just over a year essentially to the World Test Championship final. You have to assume that India will definitely be there. It's just who they happen to play in the final. You just have to assume that, right? I guess a sub question to all of this, and the reason why I kind of gave you the kind of there's only a year really till it happening, is there realistically any chance of new players being introduced for India? Because it kind of feels to me like, let me just find that squad again. It kind of feels to me like the squad that's been named already for the Bangladesh series, you would be shocked if there is too much change from that squad to the squad that ends up playing the World Test Championship final. So you want to see teams evolve, but because there will be so much primacy on we've got to win that title, do you see any evolution in the squad in the next year?
India was compelled to do that in the series against England because there were so many players who were injured. Virat Kohli was not available. So we did see a lot of youngsters getting that audition opportunity and making the most out of it. Even for the Bangladesh series, the squad that has been announced, Mohammad Shami is not fit for bowling yet. So we'd expect to see him maybe for the New Zealand Test or subsequently for the Border Gavaskar Trophy. So again, considering that this edition of the World Test Championship Finals 2 is to be played in England, so you'd expect India to be well equipped with fast bowling resources and for it to leave a dent in the opponent's batting lineup with its fast bowling resources. That's something that went missing the last two time India featured in the finals. Now, the players have already been tried. It's about penciling in on the 11 that India thinks would hold it in good stead. So I do not see a room for more players being tried out, new debuts being handed, although the Indian domestic season has just commenced, and that again is the opportunity for the players to show their true mettle and show what they can contribute. And it's been very strategically planned because the Border Gavaskar Trophy would be held during the end of the year, and the series or the Indian domestic season has started with red ball action. So it's Duleep Trophy and then Ranji Trophy. Nearly half of Ranji Trophy would be held, and the selectors would get ample options. If there is any name that manages to create ripples, India might then give that person a look in. Otherwise, I do not see a whole lot of changes before the World Test Championships. But now the bigger question is, after that has concluded, whether India has won or not, what transpires after that? Does India go into transition? Do the big names then step away? Because then the next cycle, of course, would be 2 years away. The next finals would be 2 years away. That's my question to you. Do you think India
That's
should?
a yes. You're asking me the question, but in my head, I'm trying to think of it as to how I would view it if we were in, as a West Indian, if we were in the same position to India. The thing that I would be asking the senior players like Rohit and Virat, etc., to think about is what else is there for you to achieve? What?
The
Unless
questions
they
change
said
depending on whether India wins or not, right?
yes, yeah. So if they don't win, so let's assume they don't win. Let's say they don't win the World Test Championship. The question then becomes, okay, we didn't win the World Test Championship, but then there's a very fine line, Megha, between you didn't win it, should you go again because you're Virat Kohli, you're Rohit Sharma, or should it be, come on, guys, we've got to start transitioning in the new guys over the next 18-month cycle to the next World Test Championship? And I assume that in India there will be a big debate about it because, I mean, those two are almost, just to take those two as an example, they're almost bigger than cricket. So it's not as simplistic as just saying you're 37 years old or you're 36 years old. It's time to step to one side. And it's very, very hard to know when a legend of the game should be told to step to one side and when they should
Yeah.
be given the right to say, actually, I don't think I can contribute anything anymore. But then the question I put back to you then is, say they do win the World Test Championship. Do you think some of them, let's say Rohit more than Virat, say they won the
Yeah.
World Test Championship, do you think someone like Rohit would then go, yep, that's it, I've done everything now, I'm going to step aside from Test cricket?
We saw that happening in T20Is, right? But then again,
Yeah,
I
exactly,
have
yeah.
to add a disclaimer there that immediately after the 2022 edition of the World Cup, T20 World Cup got over, it looked like India had begun looking ahead. They went back to Virat and Rohit. Uh, a lot of things happened in between. Hardik Pandya got injured. Suryakumar Yadav got injured. Maybe Hardik Pandya's case is more important to what subsequently happened. But yeah, so the situations are slightly different, but just the fact that that trophy continues to elude us, that Test Championship trophy, despite us trying and getting so close twice. I think if India manages to win the WTC trophy, at least Rohit Sharma, I think he'd step back, he'd retire. Although, having said that, what happens after the Champions Trophy is over, that too would determine what happens after the World Test Championship is over, because the questions then again change. If India wins the Champions Trophy, if India doesn't do well in the Champions Trophy, if India makes it to the finals of the Champions Trophy, what sort of form the players walk into the Champions Trophy with, in and out of it. So I think it's pretty complicated at the moment because there's so much happening already. In the meanwhile, there's this question from Sanket that I'd like you to address. Akash Deep would be a major player for a backup to Shami Bumrah Siraj trio going ahead in the long test season. You must have seen him during the England series, and he managed to create triples immediately. And he's been impressive in the domestic season as well. Now he's leaving his mark. What do you like about him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he's an exciting, promising talent. What I would say more so than was a bring that put the question up again just so I can
Yeah,
read it.
here we go. As
Should he
backup
be
to
a major player? Right. Okay. Yeah. I do think that test nations, and this is all test nations, need to get better at understanding that rotation is good. And sometimes some nations are better than others at this. So I'll use England as an example. I went to all of the test matches, England versus West Indies, and Mark Wood played in I think he played pretty much most of it, right? And obviously
Yeah.
he's broken down now against Sri Lanka,
Hmm.
and he's like seen as their like great pace hope. And I just look sometimes at teams, I'm like, you don't have to play your best players all the time. So I don't look at it as should this guy Akash be
Yeah.
a backup player? He can be a front line player because respect. And I say this with respect to Bangladesh. I say this with respect to New Zealand. But you can rotate against you can rotate against Bangladesh. You can rotate the Test series versus New Zealand is 3 Test matches. You can rotate against New Zealand. And to be frank, Meha, in a 5-match Test series, the same bowling attack shouldn't be playing in a 5-match
Yeah.
Test series. Not anymore. Not when these players are playing. Well, maybe not. Obviously, the Indian players don't go all around the world in terms of franchise cricket, but in terms of international cricket, when their schedules are so full, there is no reason to be saying this is our first choice 11. Really, the first choice 11 should be a first choice 15 and 16, and you should be comfortable with the notion of our first 16 is our first 11, and we rotate in as and when to load manage the health of our players. But I think some teams, I'm not saying India per se, but I think some teams are still trapped into this idea that you must pick your strongest
Yeah.
11 at all times. And I just don't think that's logical in the modern day and age of how packed the cricket calendar is.
At least when it comes to batting, India too have shown affinity to picking their best 11. In Test series, we do see players being rested for the shorter formats, but in Tests, India does send its best 11. India does pick its best 11, at least the batters make it. The bowlers' case is more interesting because, for example, Jasprit Bumrah, India wanted to rest Jasprit Bumrah, but with the series precariously placed, India couldn't take that call. So all that got tricky. I'll just quickly go through the comments. There are a load of them, and maybe you can pick one of those to answer. Sarat says that if India win all 5 Test matches and qualify for the World Test Championship finals, going to play Border Gavaskar Trophy, where will players stand, play fearlessly as they have qualified, or less concerned about it, or less focused about it? If India already qualify for the WTC finals, I think they would look at Border Gavaskar Trophy independently, but quickly we take your response to it. And Tanveer says, why was Greater Noida chosen as a venue? Apparently, Afghanistan board wanted it. They've played there before, treated it as their home venue. And Sanket says, I don't think the WTC title matters that much to anyone really. Upcoming Australia and England tours are to be the last major tours for some of India's champions. Of course, that matters more. That's an interesting question. Dhruv says
Yeah,
that
no, leave that one up.
statistically,
Put that one back.
yeah,
Megha, put that one
and
back
it's very
again. The one
similar.
about
It's very similar
yeah.
to the next one by Dhruv. He says WTC is a
I want you
standalone
to-
match.
Yes.
Yeah,
So let's look at
back to
those
the previous
two,
comment.
and this is where I kind of want to kind of wrap this, because I think that's a good
Yeah.
cliffhanger to kind of leave this episode on. I would love to know, everyone who's watching this live, or if you're watching this on the repeat replay, let us know in the comments below. Do you think the World Test Championship title doesn't matter as much as the Border Gavaskar or the series versus England? Because that's a very interesting point. It may well be the last major tour for the Rohits and the Virats in these particular places. So is the legacy of that for those players more important? Or, to me, I can only give my answer, people. And my answer is that because India haven't won the World Test Championship yet, it matters.
Yeah.
If they had won it, I'm willing to entertain that argument. But I think that within the Indian inner sanctum, they will feel that they need that title, that they need that title to cement their standing as a dominant Test nation. Yes, it's not. The World Test Championship is only something recently introduced in the last 7 years, or whatever it might be. But it mattered to the Australians when they won it.
Yeah.
I think it will matter to India that they win it as well. So I don't agree with this notion that it's only a final, or it's only a standalone. If you haven't won it yet, I think it matters to teams. But I don't know. Let people let me know in the comments below.
Interesting. And the scenes after India won the T20 World Cup, because it was an ICC trophy, India celebrated it heartily. And it matters. And it matters because it's an ICC trophy. But yeah, we await your comments in the comment section. As of now, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Mash. And once again, remember to sign up at cricket8.com.
Remember to support us by subscribing and sharing, but also signing up at Cricket8.com, where live scorecards cover 8,000 matches a year with advanced visual details that tell you who is actually in front in the game.